Have you ever emptied your entire emergency fund to fix a girl's car because she called you crying at 5 in the morning? No, just me.
Yuko. I did exactly that.
I drove across the city, in the pitch black, handed over every cent I had saved for my own tools, and walked out of the shop, grinning like ID just secured a future with the woman of my dreams.
Few 1 hour later.
While I was still sitting in the parking lot catching my breath, she sent me a text that changed everything. Let's just be friends. Those 4 words didn't just break my heart. They flicked a switch inside me.
True, my name is Paul.
Let's rewind a bit because if you knew what led to that moment, you'd think I was an absolute sucker. And honestly, you'd be right. I met Fiona at a housewarming party back in April.
Begged.
She was 25, worked as an office coordinator, and she had this supernatural ability to make you feel like the only person in a room full of hundreds.
Fix him.
When I told her I worked on complex automated warehouse systems, she didn't give me that polite glazed over look people usually do.
Beep.
She leaned in her eyes, sparkling, and asked about the most insane malfunction Eid ever had to troubleshoot.
Fainted.
I told her a story about a rogue barcode scanner causing a total system collapse, and she just laughed, telling me I was like a robot doctor. I was gone.
Done for.
That was the night it started.
First, we started texting that same evening.
By the end of that first week, we were inseparable. Morning texts turned into late night marathons that only stopped when one of us finally drifted off to sleep. It felt real.
Felt like it was leading towards something obvious, something meaningful.
We started hanging out mostly in groups, then slowly transitioning into one unknown time that felt exactly like dates.
We never officially labeled them that way.
Shed hug me goodbye and hold on for just a second too long, leaving me with that lingering warmth. Every single signal she sent was a green light. Then, the favors started.
Fiend, they were small at first.
A leaking bathroom faucet. Could you take a look? It took me 20 minutes to fix, and she stood in the doorway the entire time laughing at my jokes and handing me tools.
Finished.
She placed her hand on my arm and whispered seriously, "Paul, what would I do without you?" That was the hook. I felt like I was making progress. Soon it was furniture assembly.
Things.
Then, a whole Saturday spent mounting a TV and programming her thermostat because she claimed the apartment was impossible for her to figure out.
Drove to her place.
On a Sunday in August, just to change her oil while she watched from the window like a queen observing her subject. Every time I finished, she had the same compliment ready.
You're such a good guy, I'm so lucky to have you.
I ate it up. But every time I tried to steer the conversation toward us, she'd redirect. I love hanging out. Paul, let's not overthink things.
Fake.
I just got out of a bad situation, not ready for labels. Why can't I find a guy like you, Paul? Not a guy like me, just a guy like you.
Thanked.
5 months in, I had been working 11 hours, on my feet knee-deep in freezing water in a warehouse. I was exhausted. I texted her at 9 that night. Rough one. Today you free to grab dinner? Could use some company.
He replied.
Oh, that sucks! I'm heading out with the girl's rain check. The rain check never came. But 3 days later, when her kitchen faucet started acting up at midnight, guess whose phone rang?
Thanked Joe.
My buddy Joe, who worked on my team, watched this pattern repeat for months. One night, sitting in his truck eating cold burritos, he looked at me and said,
Feed it.
"Brother, you aren't her boyfriend. You're her personal unpaid it department with feelings." I didn't have an answer for that. I changed the subject, but his words haunted me. Then came that October morning, 5 a.m.
Bjorn.
I was pulling on my boots before she even finished her sentence. Her 2016's Volkswagen Jetta manual she bragged about, because nobody drives stick anymore, had died in her lot. She had a final round job interview in Minneapolis that morning. A career-defining opportunity. She was hyperventilating, completely spiraling, and when Fiona panicked, she called me.
Found him.
I met the tow truck at the shop, spoke to Gary, the owner, and demanded he work on it immediately. Gary checked it for 15 minutes. The clutch is fried. He told me pressure plate disc bearing the works. The bill was $18.45.
Where I stopped.
Being the total idiot. Before I paid, I texted her. Gary says it's $18.45 for the repair. I can cover it, but I need you to pay me back. We can work out a plan. she replied instantly. Oh my God, yes!
Favor ill.
Pay you back as soon as I get this job, I promise. I paid the money. I walked out feeling like ID just cemented my place in her life. Then the ping Paul, thank you for everything. But honestly,
Think we should just stay friends.
I've realized I don't see you that way. I stood there in the cold, staring at the screen. The anger didn't come immediately. It was clarity. Ice cold clarity. I walked back into the shop.
Gary.
I said, my voice steady. I need to talk to you about the car. Everything. Okay, he asked. Change of plans, I said. I didn't authorize that work. Yet, right? Technically you paid, but I haven't turned a wrench on it. Why?
Pulled out my phone.
She just decided. We're just friends. I think she can handle the repair herself. I got every cent back. I walked out to her car, which was sitting in the lot still dead. I didn't say a word.
Vincent.
I just pulled out my phone and texted her. I understand. I've reversed the payment. Since we're just friends, I'm sure you'll find another way to handle your car. Good luck with the interview. She started calling me 10 times in a row.
You know.
I didn't answer. She showed up at my work an hour later, crying, shouting that I was a jerk, that I'd ruined her interview, that I was supposed to be a good guy.
Her dead in the eye and said, good guys aren't your personal mechanics, Fiona.
They're partners and you never treated me like one. She had to beg her father for the money. She missed her interview. For the first time in months, I went home, turned off my phone, and slept like a baby. Justice isn't always a courtroom. Sometimes it's just knowing your own worth and refusing to pay for someone else's convenience.
You.
Never let them treat you like an ATM for their affection. You're better than that. The October air in Fargo bit harder than a stray dog, but the cold inside my chest was far worse.
You.
I sat in my truck outside Knutson's, auto-shop the heater, rattling like a dying breath, staring at the screen of my phone. Before I had swiped my card, sent a clear, direct message to Fiona.
Yushi.
I told her Harry had confirmed a full clutch replacement for the Volkswagen Jetta, totaling $1845 in parts and labor.
Explained.
I explained that while I had the cash to cover it, I needed a repayment plan, asking if she was comfortable with that. Her response appeared in under 30 seconds, filled with frantic gratitude.
Feed.
She promised to pay back every single cent, claiming I was saving her life and calling me her hero. I took a screenshot of that promise, then walked inside and authorized the full charge on my debit card.
Perfect.
The transaction cleared my account at 7:23 a.m. just as I told her. The car would be road ready by 3 p.m. for her trip to Minneapolis.
He replied
Immediately, calling me the most incredible person she had ever met and insisting she didn't deserve someone like me.
venting.
I sat there feeling like a king, having drained 8 months of savings I'd intended for new shop tools just to help her out.
You.
I had known Fiona for 6 months, and I was certain this act of devotion would finally change the way she looked at me. At 8.
Finch.
31 am exactly 68 minutes after my bank account hit zero, the notification tone cut through the silence.
Thinking.
I was still sitting in the parking lot, nursing a lukewarm coffee from the gas station, when the screen lit up with her name. She said she had been doing a lot of thinking and needed to be honest with me about her feelings.
Fond.
My stomach dropped, falling into a void as I watched the 3 typing dots bounce for what felt like an eternity. She called me one of the best people she knew, claiming I was at the very top of her list. Then came the hammer. He felt we worked much better as just friends and didn't want to lead me on. I read the message 3 times, my eyes drifting back to the bank alert, still glowing on my screen. 68 minutes.
You knowed.
I had waited longer for Gary to finish the quote than the time she had spent between professing I was her savior and dumping me into the friend zone.
Faked.
She had obviously drafted that text before I even swiped my card, waiting for the payment to clear before hitting send. The old Paul would have written a manifesto,
Fan.
laying out every night phone call and every time Shed leaned into me to make me feel like more than just a guy with a truck. Instead, I took a long breath and typed 3 words. Appreciate your honesty.
Faked.
I added. A simple good luck at your interview tomorrow, muted her notifications, and stared at the ice forming on the windshield for another 10 minutes.
Fiona.
picked up the Jetta that afternoon, and when I forwarded the receipt with the paid stamp, she sent back a single heart emoji. No mention of the money, no mention of the breakup, just a heart for an 1845 favor.
Friend. She wanted a friend.
And she was about to learn exactly what friendship looks like when the friend stops being a doormat.
Fan.
I pulled back instantly, offering nothing more than onward replies and declining every invitation she threw my way.
Here.
The day after her interview, she texted to say she killed it and that the job was hers, claiming she owed it all to me. I waited 4 hours before replying nice congrats.
Figgy.
When she tried to invite me over for a movie and takeout that weekend, I told her I was busy though. I was actually sitting at home watching videos on small claims court.
For a week of my distance.
Her tone shifted from warm to confused and finally to irritated. She asked if she had done something wrong, and I kept my reply brief. Nah, just been slammed with work.
Victim.
2 days later, she pushed harder, saying she felt something had changed between us and didn't know what happened. She knew exactly what happened, she just never expected there to be consequences for playing people.
Few.
When she texted later that week asking me to look at her baseboard heater, I told her it was a landlord issue and to file a formal request.
Few.
I left her on red for 2 days, marking the first time in 6 months I hadn't jumped at her command. It was fascinating how quickly her friendship evaporated the moment the free labor stopped coming.
Fixed.
Picked up a side job calibrating sensors for a plant outside town, throwing every extra dollar back into my tool fund. I started hitting the gym 5 days a week, regaining the time I used to spend acting as her personal handyman.
Ration pop.
Joe and I started a tradition of wings and pool every Wednesday, enjoying a normal life I had put on hold for a woman who didn't exist.
3 weeks later.
I was at Walmart picking up groceries when I almost walked into a guy who looked painfully familiar. He stopped, squinted at me, and asked, "Wait, aren't you Fianna's friend Paul?"
Fend.
His name was Tyler, her ex, and he looked at me with a mixture of pity and recognition. We stepped aside, and he told me how Shed pulled the exact same playbook on him, the ceiling, fan the office setup, even a co-signed agreement.
Fend.
He had spent over $1,000 on her requests before she told him they were better off as friends.
Thinking.
When he pulled back, she had slandered him to their entire group, painting him as emotionally unstable and unable to handle rejection.
Few. 80 Tom.
She thrived on playing the victim, crying to one person so they could tell 3 more, turning you into the villain before you even knew the game had started.
Thank you.
I wasn't just reliving someone else's mistake. I was seeing a blueprint of my own future. I handed him my number, and as he shook my hand, he gave me the only piece of advice that mattered. Whatever you do, watch your back.
Fubel.
With my head held high. Knowing the debt was written off, but the lesson was paid in full. I was no longer her savior. I was finally, for the first time in months, just me.
Thinked.
This is a story about how quickly a calculated lie can dismantle your reputation, and why the truth, no matter how quiet, is the only thing that eventually cuts through the noise.
Rumchi.
The man standing behind the counter at the garage didn't even look up from his computer at first. He was just an older guy, tired, with grease permanently etched into his knuckles.
Fictiony.
I had walked in expecting a simple receipt reprint, but he looked at me with a weary, knowing expression that stopped me cold. He wasn't describing a random customer. He was describing my life down to the exact date and the specific favor I had foolishly offered. He leaned in his voice, dropping to a gravelly, serious whisper. Whatever you do, watch your back with her.
Thing.
She has a gift for rewriting history right in front of your eyes. I walked out of that shop, feeling like the ground beneath my feet had shifted.
Figsy.
I hadn't just been played by a girl, I had been a cog in a perfectly oiled machine of manipulation. She didn't need love, and she certainly didn't need a partner.
Frumton.
She needed a bank account, with a heartbeat Somi one to fix her Jetta, someone to handle the bills.
Bot.
Someone to keep the engine running while she searched for her next target.
Fiend.
I sat in my truck in the deserted parking lot for 10 minutes watching the cold wind rattle the sign above. I realized then that Tyler, the guy before me, had been exactly where I was now.
Feason.
I went home that night and began the work of an architect building a defense. I cataloged every text, every timestamp, every digital footprint of her promises.
You wanted to play the victim? I would be the historian of her crimes.
4 weeks later, the offensive began. Fiona started with a broadcast in our mutual group chat, a classic piece of gaslighting theater, finding out who your real friends are and how quickly people disappear when they don't get their way. It was vague enough to sound noble, but pointed enough to leave a bruise. I didn't bite.
Fiction.
I let the silence sit in the room heavy and awkward. 3 days later, she posted on Instagram a picture of her leaning against the very car I had paid to repair. The caption was a masterclass in deception.
You.
Rough month, but I'm still standing. She thanked her real ones, her rocks, the people who actually showed up for her. Everyone in our circle knew who bought those parts and paid that labor bill.
Thank you.
Note it was a preemptive strike. I decided to play my card. I left one single comment beneath the post. Glad to see the Jetta is running smooth.
Fiction.
Are we still on track with the repayment plan for that 1845 clutch job? No pressure, just want to make sure we're on the same page. 10 minutes later, the post vanished into the digital void.
Fume the thing.
My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Friends were calling confused, realizing the narrative they had been fed was a fabrication. I didn't answer a single call. The comment had already been screenshotted and shared.
Truth has a way of moving faster than a lie when the proof is sitting in the open.
2 days later at 6:15 a.m., the air was biting a typical North Dakota November morning.
Thing.
I walked out of the gym to find Fiona leaning against my truck in the dark. She hadn't come to talk, she had come to intimidate. She didn't let me get my keys out before she started in on me.
Stop telling people about the car.
She snapped, her voice sharp with desperation. You're making me look like a monster.
Told her.
I hadn't said a word until she tried to take public credit for a repair she hadn't paid for. She pivoted instantly, claiming she didn't owe me anything because I had volunteered for it.
Fixing.
I leaned against the truck bed, keeping my voice steady. I have a text where you literally promised to pay me back every single cent. Do you want me to read it to you?
Fict.
Her mask slipped just for a second, replaced by cold, hard malice. She stepped into my space, thinking the physical proximity would make me shrink.
Vet.
You only did that because you were trying to buy your way into a relationship, she spat. Not going to be punished just because you caught feelings. I looked her dead in the eye.
Feelings about my personal life
don't change the arithmetic of a lone Fiona. She dropped the act entirely, her face twisting into a sneer. You keep pushing this, I'm going to tell people things about you that will make your life a living nightmare. I mean it. Paul.
Feud.
I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and rolled the window down just enough to be heard. Make sure your lies are convincing, because I'm keeping a record of every word you've ever sent me.
Fixed.
I drove away, watching her silhouette shrink in the rearview mirror. She thought a threat would break me, but she had underestimated how much I valued the truth. Then came the surgical strike.
Fume.
She took my text asking for the money, but she cropped it, removing her own promise to pay. It looked like I was a bitter, rejected guy demanding money for a gift. She sent it to Casey Kelsey and a girl named Maddie, people I had known for years. The fallout was instant. Casey messaged me, his tone heavy with betrayal. Man, she showed me some texts, and this looks really bad.
I didn't argue.
I just sent him the full unedited screenshot. The silence on the other end lasted for 2 minutes before he replied, Oh, wow. That's not at all what she showed me. I realized then that she was losing control.
Reason.
The cropped version died a quick death, but the poison she had spread in the wider circle was harder to scrub away. Round 1 was a draw, but she wasn't finished. She went to the garage determined to burn the bridge entirely.
Thing.
She called Gary at the shop, trying to claim the repair was unauthorized, demanding the charge be reversed. She thought she was ending the story, but she was actually handing me the final nail in her coffin.
Fict.
She didn't realize that Gary, a man who had seen every grifter in North Dakota, had been waiting for her to try exactly that. The following is a dramatic storytelling script designed for a YouTube narration.
Crafted.
to maintain high tension, emotional weight, and a rhythmic, slow burn delivery style. It started with a simple favor for someone I thought I could trust.
Failed.
I never imagined that helping Fiona with her car would eventually turn my life into a calculated psychological battlefield. You seem the kind of person who believes in doing the right thing.
Some people don't value kindness.
Some people look at your generosity and see a target. This isn't just about money anymore.
Fiendsen.
This is about a woman who decided that if she couldn't silence the truth, she would destroy the messenger. Round one was a stalemate, but Fiona wasn't walking away. She was just reloading.
You dang.
The next morning, I received a call from Gary over at the mechanic shop. His voice sounded tight, annoyed. He told me that Fiona had called him demanding. He reversed the charges for her repair.
He told him.
The payment was unauthorized, that I had paid for her car without her permission, as if I were some kind of obsessed stalker trying to force my way into her life. Can you believe that? He paid the bill because she begged me to, because she promised she'd pay me back every cent. Gary didn't buy it for a second. He told me she got aggressive when he refused to play along.
He said, I've been doing this for 22 years.
Paul, I know exactly what a scam smells like, and this is rotten. But what I didn't realize then was that Fiona knew my every move. She knew my gym hours.
But my Wednesday wing nights with Joe.
She knew where I worked. I used to think our coincidental meetings were just fate. I was dead wrong. Wednesday night arrived. I was at our usual spot with Joe Midlaw when the front door swung open. Fiona walked in. She wasn't alone. She had two girls I'd never seen before in tow. She scanned the room like a predator hunting for a reaction. When our eyes locked, she didn't look away. She held my gaze for 3 long, icy seconds. Then she marched her group to a table just 12 feet from ours. She sat down facing me directly and started talking. She wasn't whispering. She was projecting. She was crafting a narrative for her audience. I've been dealing with this guy, she said, her voice loud enough to cut through the music. He's completely obsessed.
He paid for my car, just to hold it over my head. Now he won't stop harassing me for the money.
She kept glancing at me, checking to see if I was suffering under the weight of her lie.
Fix.
One of her friends leaned in, looking genuinely uneasy. That's actually kind of scary. Have you called the police yet? Fiona didn't miss a beat. She turned it up a notch, knowing the table behind us was listening.
Fard, I'm honestly thinking about it.
He keeps showing up where I am. I don't feel safe. My blood went cold. I had been coming to this bar every Wednesday for months. She knew that. She picked this place on purpose.
He was setting the stage for a false report.
She wanted me to snap, to stand up, to yell, to create the scene she needed to show the police. It was pure bait, but she didn't know who she was dealing with. I didn't yell.
I didn't lose my cool.
I calmly reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened the voice recorder. I pressed record and set it face up on the table, right between Joe and me. Then I went back to eating my wings.
Fam, I didn't look at her.
I didn't say a single word. I just let the device capture every syllable of her performance. 2 minutes later, the energy at her table shifted.
He looked down.
Spotted my phone and the color drained from her face. Her friends noticed. They stopped laughing. They started looking at the door. 10 minutes later, they were gone. Joe leaned in, his voice low.
He's building a paper trail. Brother.
She's setting a trap you can't walk out of. I knew he was right, but my hands were shaking under the table. Not from fear, but from the realization that someone could look you in the eye, stand in a crowded room, and brand you as a monster just to avoid paying a debt. 3 days later, the stakes got higher. I pulled into a job site near West Fargo, and a massive guy was leaning against my truck. He wore a Carhartt jacket and had the look of someone ready for a fight. He walked toward me, chest puffed out. Are you Paul? Who's asking? A friend of Fiona's. She told me everything. The stalking, the harassment.
Threats.
He stepped closer, his shadow looming over me. You need to leave her alone. I felt the adrenaline surge, but I stayed composed. I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain my innocence. I just pulled out my phone and held it out. The full text thread, the original cost, her promise to pay, Her own words in black and white. He read it line by line.
Deal.
I watched the anger in his face evaporate, replaced by a sickening realization. She agreed to pay you back, he muttered, his voice dropping. In writing, I replied. He looked at me, then at the phone, then back at me.
This is really messed up, man.
Sorry. He walked away, but the damage was already done. The following week, the nightmare hit my career. My supervisor, Mike, pulled me aside. He'd received an anonymous phone call.
Thing.
The woman on the other end had described me perfectly. My habits, my job, my face. She told him I was a predator, that I was stalking her home, that I was a danger to the public. She didn't just want my money.
Fusion.
She wanted my reputation. She wanted to burn my life to the ground because I had the nerve to ask for what was rightfully mine. But she made one fatal mistake.
He assumed.
That a man who works for a living doesn't know how to keep records. Every text, every recording, every witness it was all in my folder. She thought she was setting a trap for me. She didn't realize she was building a mountain of evidence that would eventually bury her own lies. The game wasn't over. It was just getting started. And in the end, justice isn't a suggestion. It's an inevitability.
Peace.
Have you ever been pushed so far that you stopped trying to explain yourself and started documenting everything instead? There comes a point in every man's life where you realize that being the nice guy is actually a liability.
For weeks, I was the villain
In a story I didn't even recognize. My reputation was being shredded, my job was being threatened, and all because I dared to ask for the money that was rightfully mine.
Here is the thing about liars.
They rely on you staying quiet. They never expect you to bring a binder to a knife fight. Fiona wasn't just dodging a debt, she was orchestrating a full-scale character assassination.
She didn't just ignore the 1845.
She owed me for her car repair, she turned it into a weapon. She took my kindness and twisted it, telling everyone I was an obsessed, unstable creep who couldn't handle a no, the worst part.
He actually called my office.
She looked up my company's number, rehearsed a sob story about me stalking her, and tried to blow up my career. She wanted me so worried about my livelihood that I'd be too terrified to ask for my money back. Mike, my manager, called me into his office on a Tuesday. He closed the door and the air felt heavy.
Fall,
he said, his voice flat. I got a call, an anonymous complaint about your behavior toward a woman named Fiona. She claims you're harassing her. I didn't panic. I didn't stutter. I reached into my bag and pulled out the binder.
E.T.
I laid everything on the initial agreement, the text, the record of the car repair, and the screenshots of her manipulative messages. I didn't say a word. I just let the evidence scream for me.
Vex.
Mike scanned the pages, his expression shifting from concerned to impressed. He leaned back and let out a long breath. So she owes you money, and she's trying to sabotage your job to make you stop asking for it.
The short version, Mike.
He shook my hand, telling me that people who are in the wrong don't show up with a binder of facts. That was my first shift in power. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a man with documentation.
That night,
I reached out to Tyler. I knew I wasn't the only one Shed played. He sent me the screenshots within the same language, the same framing, just a different victim.
Thing.
I opened our mutual group chat, the one where everyone had been whispering about me for weeks. I didn't yell, I didn't insult her. I just posted the facts. Hey, everyone, I want to clear the air in October. Fiona's car broke down.
Fade.
I paid $18.45 to get it running. She signed an agreement to pay me back. Since then, I've been harassed. My job was targeted, and she's tried to reverse the charges at the shop. I attached the unedited full-text exchange.
Fix.
Then I muted the notifications and threw my phone in a drawer. The group chat went nuclear. The detail about her calling my employer was the tipping point.
People who had been buying her
Poor me act were suddenly looking at the truth in black and white. Even Kelsey, who had been spreading rumors, apologized to Joe, saying she felt gross for ever believing Fiona.
Fiona didn't say a word in the group.
The silence was deafening, but privately she went into a tailspin. She texted me, begging, threatening, and finally trying to gaslight me. You humiliated me!
Thing, a hard time. If you keep pushing ill-show people a side of you they won't believe.
I didn't respond.
You
I sent a formal demand letter via certified mail with a green-bordered envelopeth kind that makes your heart sink. 6 days later, the receipt came back signed. Then the real twist happened.
you
Maddie Fiona's closest friend called me. Her tone was shaken. She had been on a call with Fiona, who was screaming he was never going to be my boyfriend
needed him to pay for the car.
because he was useful. Why would I say no? Maddie had been keeping receipts of her own because Fiona's cruelty had started to disturb her. She forwarded everything to me.
Fiona,
Hadn't just been lying to me. She had been laughing at me behind my back. Fiona thought she was the puppet master, but she was just a liar running out of string.
with Maddie's testimony and the mountain of evidence.
I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to chase her. Justice wasn't loud. It was inevitable. The last I heard, she's paying back every cent, and her reputation in our circle is gone. You see, when you rely on manipulation, you eventually run out of people to manipulate. And as for me, I learned that being good doesn't mean being a doormat.
You,
Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is keep your head down, keep your receipts, and let the truth do the talking.
Brumming,
Do you ever realize that the person you thought was your soulmate was actually just a cold, calculating strategist?
fix,
I spent months believing I was the hero in someone else's life, only to find out I was nothing more than a line item on a budget spreadsheet.
fit.
My name is Paul, and this is the story of how a 1845 loan turned into a lesson that cost me my sanity but bought back my freedom. The realization didn't hit me all at once.
Fiend,
It started with a phone call from Kelsey, a mutual friend who had seen right through Fiona's mask months before I ever did. Kelsey told me she knew exactly what Fiona was doing, and she honestly thought it was a joke.
she said.
Paul, if you ever need a witness to her games, just call me. I thanked her, but in that moment, the silence of my kitchen table felt deafening. Everything clicked.
He wasn't.
Confused about our relationship, she was managing me. I was a subscription service. She could cancel the moment a better offer came along. Every sweet text at 2 a.m., every time she leaned into my shoulder in the carrot wands and affection. It was maintenance. It was keeping the hook set so the fish wouldn't swim away until she was ready to reel him in.
The car incident was the final straw.
The transmission in her Volkswagen Jetta had failed in the dead of a North Dakota winter. I didn't just help, I emptied my tool fund. Drove across Fargo at 5 a.m.
He was crying.
and paid for the repairs so she wouldn't miss her big interview. I thought I was saving the day for someone I cared about. She knew exactly what she was doing when she accepted that money.
He knew I was in love with her.
And she decided to cash out the biggest chip on the table before kicking me to the curb. 30 days passed. No payment. No text. No. I need more time. Nothing. Radio silence. She treated my life like it was a ghost story, hoping that if she didn't acknowledge the debt, it would simply vanish into the frost. But she made one fatal mistake. She underestimated the paper trail.
Here,
I didn't reach out to argue. I didn't beg for an explanation. I headed straight to the Cass County District Court and filed a small claim suit. $1845 plus the filing fees.
Yoon,
When the bailiff served her papers at her apartment on a Tuesday morning, I imagine the look on her face was priceless. The hearing was set for early February.
for weeks.
Fiona stayed silent, projecting the image of someone who had nothing to worry about. But the day of the hearing, the reality hit the fluorescent lights of the courtroom. It wasn't like the movies.
Yoon,
There were no dramatic lawyers or juries. Just a judge, a gavel, and 15 minutes to prove that a promise is a promise. I presented my case like a blueprint for a motor clean, precise, and impossible to misinterpret.
fade.
I showed the judge the texts where she promised to pay me back. I showed the bank statements. I showed the receipt for the car repairs.
You,
When the judge finally looked at Fiona, she was dressed to the nines, thinking that a nice outfit could cover up a broken contract.
Your Honor,
She said, her voice dripping with practiced innocence. This was a gift.
he was trying to date me.
And when I rejected his romantic advances, he decided to retaliate. The judge didn't even blink. He picked up the printout of our conversation. He read her own words back to her.
Thing,
Yes, I will pay you back every cent, I promise. Where is the gift language here? Ma'am, the judge asked, peering over his glasses. She had nothing. No payments made. No plans for a future installment.
The judge ruled in my favor within 10 minutes.
The full amount plus the filing costs. Fiona didn't look at me when she left.
Dean,
She grabbed her coat, marched toward the door, and vanished into the February cold like the building was on fire. Joe. My brother was waiting for me on the bench outside.
you.
He clapped a hand to my shoulder, his face lit by the rare, harsh sun of a Fargo winter. We got it, Paul, every cent. My phone buzzed as we walked to the truck. It was a text from Fiona.
You're happy. You ruined a friendship over money.
I didn't hesitate. I typed back. Yes, 30 days, and she paid. Not on time. But 26 days later, the money appeared in my account, while I was elbow deep in a garage project.
Phelp.
I deposited it, cleared the debt, and then I did the most satisfying thing of all.
Dot.
Deleted her number. I deleted the photos. I deleted the version of myself that was desperate to be used by someone who didn't value me.
We moved to Minneapolis for that job. New city.
New people, fresh start. I hope she finds whatever it is she's looking for, and I really hope the next guy she meets is smart enough to keep his receipts.
Binged.
Guys, we are so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers on this channel. If you haven't joined our community yet, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It's a small click for you, but it helps us keep telling these stories and keeping the truth in the light.
Dot.
Thanks for being part of this journey.